Uh, hey guys, welcome back. Um, my name's Mike James, and today I'm going to be joined with a good friend of mine. His name is Ryan Gebo. Him and his wife own Nurtured Nutrition, and Ryan's someone I was lucky enough to meet probably about a year ago now.
Mm.
Ryan is a brown belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, something I aspire to be someday. And in many ways, when I met Ryan, I was lucky enough to learn a little bit about him and kind of look up to him and some of his philosophies. That relationship has grown now for about a year. And a couple of weeks ago, I started to inquire really about how he could help some of my students with intuitive eating and really pick his brain about nutrition as a whole. And when we started talking, I started to realize that this is something that many people don't understand. And his ability to articulate what it means to eat intuitively and to pay attention to your body really drew me to ask him to come on this podcast today. So here we are. So Ryan, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks, MJ. That was a great introduction. I like how you led with brown belt and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and not my formal career role.
Well, it is something, and I really do mean it. That's something that I'm aspiring to be. So, and the amount of hours that it takes to get to that point really just proves or says a lot about you as a person. So I figured maybe in that, I guess that's what's important to me.
It is important to me. That was absolutely the right way.
Yeah. All right. Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also a registered dietitian, and we do have a practice that does specialize in eating disorder treatment. And we have my wife and another dietitian on staff, Amanda. And that's going really well. And I'm happy to be here. And I can't believe it's only been a year. Is that accurate?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so. It's been, just about the turn of the year was about the year mark that I joined your gym.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that you meet people and it feels like you've known them forever?
It definitely is. I would say it probably happens to people like me and like you a lot more because at least I can tell you from experience, like because of the way you were welcoming, and not everybody did that. Right? When I came in, I remember very specifically, there were a few people that were very not welcoming, which is fine. Right. But you were very welcoming. You offered your expertise right away. And, that certainly drew me in because I wanted to learn more, learn as much as I possibly could. And when there's only some people that are willing to do that for you, you start to create a relationship with them. But it's actually interesting now that I'm, since we're talking about it and thinking about it, how the relationship has grown relatively quickly. And I would say definitely mutual respect for starters is a huge place to start. And we have a lot of things that we both enjoy in common. I like to eat. You like to teach people how to eat.
I love to eat. I do. I love to eat. I was just thinking as we had our discussion earlier prior to this that I really enjoyed your ability or our ability to go back and forth with discussion that is interesting, right? And we were talking about mindfulness and intuition and coping and all of these things that are important when it comes back to health. And I think I recall suggesting that the mindful approach to health is the only effective approach. And we got on the topic of how everyone loves to control everything.
Yeah.
They love to control everything about their life, including food. And that in essence is the problem for many people, whether you have a diagnosed eating disorder or you find yourself overeating occasionally or setting rules, and those rules then turn into guilt and shame, or you just have an issue in your relationship with food. And this is something that I was thinking about on the way here, is that, we do have a relationship to food. And one of the things that I really focus on with people is trying to rebuild a positive relationship with food. And I say rebuild because I think that we naturally have this. It's like, I'm sure you've seen videos of babies squatting.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
They squat with perfect form. And I think in a lot of ways, if it were possible, we would eat perfect. If there is a way to say that we eat perfect, I mean, to me, that would be listening to our body and being intuitive. But children are very intuitive with eating as well. And we lose that. We lose that with messaging from people, from social media. We lose that from TV, radio, in so many ways. Just life causes us to disconnect from the important thing about food in our body. And part of our mission when we talk to people, I suppose, is getting them to understand that and then improving their relationship back to where it was.
So I guess if I was going to kind of ask the question from me, and I'm sure there's plenty of our listeners out there that would probably want to know the answer to this as well, but I know for me, practicing my own mindfulness, I've definitely identified that I use food as reward. And I do that on many different ways, whether it's, making myself a nice meal for dinner, or just straight up rewarding myself with candy and ice cream and the things that I seem to see as a reward. I can definitely take that back to say, this was something that I did as a kid, but how would somebody, because in I guess I'll take it one step further to say, I don't necessarily always have a problem with that. I enjoy it. It's a reward, and everybody likes rewards. But there are certainly times in my life when I've noticed that I'm rewarding myself with, way too much. You would think I became, I hit a life milestone with the amount of ice cream I eat on a Sunday night, as that reward for doing all the right things for the week, or whatever the case may be. So what would you say is kind of a way people might want to think about that aspect of food?
Yeah. It's nuanced, as with most things in life. I mean, I think you're spot on when you say that you don't necessarily, there really isn't an issue with the fact that we cope with food, right? Whether that's a reward or whether that we use it when we're sad, or perhaps we don't eat when we're sad. We use food in a number of ways to cope, and there isn't necessarily an issue with that. The issue comes up when that is our only coping strategy, when we are feeling sad and the only thing we know how to do is then eat, or we're celebrating and the only thing we know how to do is reward ourselves with food. Because, we've got 40 million years of evolution, and for most of that, food was a big part of our lives. I mean, obviously, right? And we use food in a number of ways. We don't necessarily eat just because we're hungry. And I think the problem with a lot of health and nutrition messaging is that people will say, well, you've got to just eat because food is fuel, and that's it. And we hear this all the time, right? And I typically tell people that there's 5 reasons why we eat. There's of course, the metabolic, right? Food is fuel, and that's something that we can't necessarily, get away from. And that's good. There's going to be plenty of times in our lives where we're eating because we need energy, or we need protein, or we need whatever it is. That's great. The other reason why we eat is satisfaction, right? Like, food is a pleasurable experience, and there's no denying that. It is absolutely ingrained. We have, the pleasure receptors in our brain, and it just so happens that one of those is, triggered, I suppose, by food. The other reasons why we eat would be social, right? We've got Thanksgiving coming up, which most people in our circle celebrate. And this is a very food centric holiday, and we bond with people over food, right? How often do we go out and meet up with someone and it's over food? It's at a restaurant. I mean, I met you at a cafe right before this. And so this is also something that's very ingrained into our DNA, right? Someone gives us food, we are more likely to trust them. Even to this day, there are studies saying that if we meet a stranger and they offer us food, we're more likely to trust them. And so these are things that we just can't get away from. The other two reasons would be cultural, right? We have different food practices. We have different food rituals. We eat different foods. And some of that has to do with just access to certain foods, right? Like, we don't necessarily have access to shark, right? But plenty of people do. Plenty of people engage in eating shark. The other reason would be as a spiritual practice, right? And this is not one we often think about, but I mentioned this one time with a client, and it was a younger girl, and she says, "Oh, like, you mean when I go to church and they give me a cracker?" Exactly. No one's going up in that line because they're hungry or they like the taste of that cracker. It's a spiritual practice, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think repairing the relationship with food is both recognizing that we've got the metabolic, we've got the satisfaction element, we've got spiritual, we've got cultural and social. And these are we need to satisfy each of those areas, and perhaps give some attention to some of those areas within our relationship with food. And if we're solely focused on the metabolic, well, there are surely going to be issues with that, and those will present in a number of ways. And so the original question that you had asked was, how does someone go about, repairing this maladaptive kind of coping strategy of perhaps always coping with food? Well, I mean, just be aware, right? Like, you're aware of this and your habits, MJ. You said I celebrate on Sunday nights with ice cream. Are you aware of this as you're doing it?
In the back of my mind, for sure. In the front of my mind, not cognitively. I'm just trying to put as much ice cream in that bowl as I can so I don't have to get up. If I'm being honest. But yeah, no, I see it as almost like and then what I do end up doing is saying things to myself like, all right, I'm going to have this ice cream, and then tomorrow I'm going to really, eat better, or, make good choices or, I'm someone who will even go as far as to food prep, because I do value, eating consistently and eating the right things. But I definitely use it. I definitely use it that way. And I think the way I've been doing it my whole life, I would say probably. Yeah. It's interesting, this concept that you brought up about, and it's probably the first one you brought up about using it for fuel and metabolic fuel. And I wonder how many people, or what percentage of people have ever really been hungry in our, in our circle. Like, and I don't mean hungry like, geez, I didn't eat lunch, or hungry like, it's 4 PM and I haven't eaten. Because when I talk to people about the concept of doing a 24-hour fast, it's like they almost without knowing admit they've never done it. They've never gone 24 hours without eating. And I don't know how you would know that you're using food as fuel if you've never really experienced what it feels like to be without it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that I know that many people are disconnected to their hunger and fullness cues. And this is both like a psychological and intuitive disconnection, but also physical and biochemical, because many of our hormones that dictate hunger and fullness are often downregulated or upregulated based on our behaviors around food. So if you have very poor food behaviors, you're not going to have the same biochemical and hormonal response as a child, for instance. So there's that. And in regards to, like a fast or someone not going without food, I mean, we do grow up very patterned with food, and that can be both good and bad. And because one, most of us typically eat 3 meals a day or 2 if you don't eat breakfast. And this becomes very becomes very habitual, and people don't necessarily get to lunchtime and think about if they're hungry. They get to lunchtime and they see it's 12 and they're like, well, it's time to eat, right? And we were talking about luxuries earlier, and this is a luxury for many of us to be able to choose when to eat, to choose the time. And we've just become so reliant on that, in many ways. And I do think in some ways it's beneficial to go without food, such as a fast, so that you can really feel what hunger feels like. And you could potentially afterwards really feel what fullness feels like. But at the end of the day, I think we would do so much better with health, with food, with fitness, if we listened more to those signals than if we listened to what someone on social media is saying what you should eat or how you should eat. Or, you've mentioned, do the 24-hour fast. Well, maybe they shouldn't listen to you. Maybe they should listen to themselves.
They should listen to themselves for sure. Absolutely. I bring up that 24-hour fast just because when I realized that I had never done it, it made me think to myself, geez, like, and to your point about how we've evolved into this thing, and from what I'm understanding, we were hunters and gatherers, and just as recently as my grandparents, right? My grandparents had a garden because they couldn't, that was how they got food, right? And if there was no food, if the garden didn't grow, then they didn't necessarily eat.
Right.
And that's only, 2 generations removed. Now I don't have a garden, and, thankfully I've never had to go without food for a long period of time. And when someone brought it up to me, and I realized I had never done it, I started to think, well, geez, maybe it was a good thing to try. And what I've realized, what I learned, was when I would break my fast, when I first started doing it, when I would break my fast, I would not even necessarily eat until I was full. I would just eat and just eat and eat and eat with the understanding that I hadn't eaten, not eat and say, okay, that's enough.
Right.
It was like, because I knew I hadn't eaten, I was like, I'm gonna eat all this food, and I'm gonna have dessert, and I'm gonna reward myself for doing that 24-hour fast. And then when I was talking to you, and you were really helping me understand these hunger cues. I actually, a few different times, I probably didn't even need to eat at that 24-hour period.
Right.
For whatever the reason is. I don't know what the reason would be, but now I'm more aware from learning from you and from talking to you and listening to my body more. Then maybe, like you said, certainly shouldn't listen to me as far as I'm still learning. So, I mean, I'm definitely don't know what's good for anybody but me, and I'm still trying to identify what's good for me. But yeah, I certainly, I like the way you were able to articulate the reasons that we eat. There certainly are more than reward or just, filling ourselves up.
Right. I mean, it comes down to flexibility and ability to adapt, I think, for a lot of people. And when someone says, well, do this diet plan or do this regimen and don't deviate, you're putting in a series of rules that control your behaviors around food when your body's got all the answers. It's, why are we stepping so far outside the realm of the body? And, mindfulness is becoming a bigger topic, and this is great because I think that many people can benefit from pursuits such as the ones that you're, having people engage with, right, with Simple Healthy Life. And I think it is important to integrate food and eating into that mindfulness-based practice. And so this is what intuitive eating is. And there may be time periods where your body's just not hungry. You don't need food. And, it's accurate. Personal disclosure here, I do intermittent fasting, and I've been doing that for a long time, MJ. I think 6 years. And then a couple years during college, and it just so happens that I enjoy the way that the way I live my life, I guess, is conducive to that, and not only that, but my body seems to enjoy it as well. I'm not super hungry in the morning. I'm not really hungry as I'm working, and I get hungry towards the period of time where I'm most active, which happens to be at night. It's when I do jiu-jitsu. And so most of my intake is at night. That's where a lot of my hunger cues come. That's what my body enjoys. And if more people were able to try something new or eat in a way that is intuitive, then I think they would find regimens such as fasting to be somewhat normal, or perhaps they'll find that 3 meals a day works for them. But I think that the idea here is that there isn't one plan that works well for everyone, but there is a way to go about identifying how you eat. And this is always what I tell people. It's not what we eat. While what we eat is important, such as, having a little bit more protein, maybe eating some more vegetables, maybe eating some more fruit, right? Like those are clear recommendations. But most of the benefit of food and nutrition can come from just recognizing how we eat. And that means, are we eating when we're hungry? Are we honoring hunger cues? Are we honoring fullness cues? Or are we blowing right by them until we're, stuffed and falling asleep on the couch in a painful, bloaty mess?
So let me ask you, is it true that that your body doesn't tell you you're hungry, it doesn't tell you you're full until, a certain few minutes after you've done eating? Because I keep reading and hearing that that you won't even know you're full until 20 minutes after you stop eating. Is there something to that?
There is. There's a number of ways that we feel fullness. I mean, the obvious one is there is a physical sensation of fullness, and that does tell something to our brain, right? Like when we feel food in our stomach, that can be an indicator of fullness, but it's not the only indicator, and there is far more to that than just a physical sensation. I mean, if I were to eat a head of lettuce right now, just pound it, like I would feel physically like there was something in my stomach, but I wouldn't be full, right? Uh, some of the other indicators are hormonal, right? So we eat protein, for example, is one of the nutrients that really sends a message to our body, and has it communicate to our cells that we are full. And so when protein comes in, the process of releasing these or stopping the emission of hunger hormones such as ghrelin will begin, and then we'll feel full after a period of time. And so the hormones aren't instantaneous. They take a little bit to go through the blood and send the message to the appropriate cells. There's also the rate at which food can empty the stomach, right? So you've got this physical sensation of fullness, and then you've got the emptying from the stomach into the intestines, and that can be either sped up or slowed down depending on what we eat, right? If we eat a food that's higher in fat, that will slow the rate at which food empties empties from the stomach, and so that will kind of reinforce that physical sensation of fullness. So there are a number of different, I guess, variables that go into feeling full, but it does take time. It does take a little time, and this is why I think I was sharing with you on an earlier call that we should eat slowly. We should eat pretty slow, at least slower than what we're used to. Because I don't know about you, but I almost naturally find myself shoveling food in when I'm hungry.
Oh yeah, I stopped talking. Just go out to dinner with the wife, and the main course comes, and then 10 minutes later we start talking again.
Yeah, yeah. So that's an indicator that we're just eating far too fast. And so, yeah, give yourself a little bit of time, or give your body a little bit of time to catch up and to kind of relay some of these messages to you. But building intuition is also a process, because we've lost so much. And I was talking about how we've lost kind of the biological messages, and those are very rhythmic in a sense. So we do have to train our body appropriately. When we're hungry, we should be honoring that, right? When that comes around, we tend not to. And this is where a lot of people get into trouble, is that they go all day without food. They go, they skip breakfast, and then lunch, I got a work meeting, and then maybe they have a little snack, or maybe around 2 p.m. they're like, wow, I'm really tired. Must be a caffeine thing. No, you're probably hungry, right? Being tired is a hunger cue. So what does hunger mean to you, right? There's a lot that goes into what we've kind of missed with intuition. But people go all day without food, and then, they've got this huge concentration of hunger hormones flowing through their blood at this point as they get home, and then they overeat, and they eat beyond fullness, and then they reinforce to the body that, these behaviors, and the body starts to try and keep up, and it just can't when you're not listening to the messages. And so at the end of the day, although the message is simple, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full, there's a lot that actually goes into like incorporating that type of practice into your day. And the same thing, I think, can be said for mindfulness too.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting, as someone who really works hard at practicing my own mindfulness routine, and I work at that, cultivating an awareness of my own thoughts, and then cultivating an awareness of my emotions. It's almost like I've gotten far enough to know that why I do some things, but I need to evolve a little further along to say, okay, now that I'm understanding of the why, and I can be mindful of how and then start to really tune into, while I can still use that bowl of ice cream as a reward,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be the one that, puts me in a coma on the couch at the end of the night.
Right.
And then that comes with all different types of feelings and emotions too, right? Because I am smart enough and aware enough to know that it isn't making me feel good the next morning, or it
Mhm.
isn't even making me feel good about myself when I'm done,
Mhm.
which is an interesting dichotomy there. I'm using something as reward, almost like a drug, where you're using it
Mhm.
to make yourself feel better, or whatever the case may be. And then when you're immediately done and you start to feel not good.
Right.
Um, so very, very interesting the way that the body intuitively knows what to do. And I think, to your point, if we could just start to listen to ourselves, our inner, our body, more than our messaging from the people that want to sell us the food, or the social media that tells us that it's okay to do these certain things, I
Mm.
think would be further along.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Further along in every in in every way too. Whatever your goal is, whether you want your body to adapt in some specific way, physically or biologically, or you're just looking to, have a little less stress when it comes to eating, I think you can benefit from being a little bit more intuitive. And in your example, the idea of, having a bowl of ice cream, because it's rewarding, well, yeah, do that, but do that appropriately. What does an appropriate amount of ice cream look like? It may not be a full bowl. It might just be a scoop that you eat slowly and you actually enjoy. You spend time savoring the fact that it is a satisfaction. It is a satisfying and fun food, right? Which we need. We need those, but we need those in appropriate amount. We need to be conscious of the effects that those foods have on us, and to to be engaging in a rewarding practice and then immediately falling into guilt and shame is not very rewarding, is it?
No, no, it's not. It's not. That's some funny stuff, though, isn't it? Um, yeah, I think I think you're right on point, and it's definitely something that, when I start to analyze this and realize that the answer is inside, right? The answer is inward. To hear you say it and to hear you articulate so well about how important it is to just to be intuitive and follow what your own body's telling you. Um, I think there's a lesson there for all of us.
Right, right. And it can be incorporated very easily into, a mindful practice that someone is pursuing in their own right. With mindfulness, you're just trying to be more aware of why you're doing the things that you're doing, or what it is that you're actually even doing. And so when you're, late at night looking for some food, ask yourself, why? Why are you doing this? And this is why I had asked you about the ice cream. Like, are you aware that you're doing it in the moment? Because I think anyone can, in hindsight, look back and say, well, yeah, I probably wasn't hungry and I was just rewarding myself, or this was just a habit. I do it every Sunday, or, that is very easy. And not to say that it's um, not, not a good thing to point out. It is absolutely beneficial to look at something in hindsight and do your own review objectively, right? And not beat yourself up. But in essence, mindfulness is doing it in that moment and identifying in that moment when you are about to get some food or not get food, whatever the behavior is, asking yourself, well, am I hungry? How hungry am I? Right? And we use this thing called the hunger scale, and it's really simple. It's a numbered scale of 1 through 10. 5 in the middle is you're not hungry or full. You're feeling very neutral. And 10 is you're super stuffed. And 1 is you're ravenous. And of course, every number in between is a different degree of hunger or fullness. 6 would be slightly slightly full. You've eaten a little. 4 would be you're slightly hungry. And so you find yourself late at night and you're opening the fridge and opening the cabinets. And, that's a perfect time to ask yourself, well, am I hungry, first of all? And I'd venture to say for many people, the answer is going to be no. I've eaten dinner. I've just eaten another snack. I'm feeling either neutral or I'm feeling like I'm slightly satisfied. I'm slightly full. Okay. You recognize this in the moment. Well, what are you looking for food then? What is it doing for you? Why are you opening the fridge right now? And so then that's where you can get into the real nitty gritty. Well, I'm looking for food right now because it's providing some amount of stimulation and I had a hard day. Is food going to solve that? Is food going to solve the fact that you're sad or lonely? And the problem with people with our behaviors and the problem with this process is the fact that when you eat, you do feel a little better for that short amount of time, right? You're feeling sad and you go and you grab something and you eat a cookie for 2 minutes and that feels pretty good. But it doesn't solve the fact that you've got an underlying emotional turbulence there that is actually not being addressed. Your Band-Aid, you're just putting a Band-Aid on it. And so if you recognize that you're sad, then what is an appropriate coping strategy for this, right? Do you need to call someone? Do you need to you need support from someone? Do you need a hug? Do you need, I don't know, do you need to watch a comedy movie, right? Do you need to journal? Do you need to meditate? What is it that's actually going to solve that emotional turbulence? Because food's not going to do that. And in many cases, it's going to make it worse. As you said, you're going to use this Band-Aid and then you're going to look back on it after and be like, I didn't need that. That was, bad for me, or is whatever kind of mental chatter that you have going on after that. And that's not helpful. And not, again, to reiterate, not to say that coping with food is unequivocally like a bad thing, but it shouldn't be the only response. If you find yourself every night, most nights, eating more because you're sad, well, you're reinforcing a real negative behavior and you're not addressing the problem, and it's patterned. And this is what I'll share with people is coping with food is fine unless it's a pattern. And so it's up to you to determine, am I engaging in unhealthy coping strategies with food that is patterned and repetitive, and that's something to really challenge on a regular basis and work on building up your own coping strategies of tools that actually do address these problems that you're experiencing.
Well, that was really well said. It was really well said. And I think that's a great message for all of us. When we really think about it, we really think about what we're trying to accomplish when it comes down to our own personal diets, our own personal behaviors, and being mindful about the things that we engage in. Are we truly getting to the root cause of the things that we want to change and the reasons that we do them? Well, I really appreciate your time today. I know I learned a lot, just like every time I talk with you. So I guess I'll do the Joe Rogan now. Ryan, tell them your website.
I appreciate it, MJ. Yeah, so you can find out more at nurturednutritionrd.com. That's where we do mostly telehealth, nutrition counseling. So if you're challenged by your relationship with food, then perhaps we can help.
I bet you can. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And so I've been dying to hit this button because now I'll say the podcast is over. Oh, that's not the button.
Wrong one.
Nope. All right, that's it. We'll see you
That is
later,
it.
guys.